Would you carry a dying billionaire's child if it meant changing your future forever? Most people would say no, until life backs them into a corner with no door and no light. Until that corner becomes a chance to reclaim your dignity, or lose it entirely. Have you ever been offered something that sounded like a blessing, but smelled like a trap? Have you ever worked so hard for people who couldn't even say your name, only to realize that money doesn't equal respect? Or been forced to choose between protecting your peace and feeding your pride? Because that's where Carissa was. Not homeless, not helpless, just tired of being invisible. She scrubbed floors for men who drank out of crystal and never looked her in the eye. Until one of those men, Wilbert Royce, the coldest billionaire in Manhattan, looked at her and asked for her womb, not her love, not her opinion, just her body. Wilbert wasn't offering romance. He was offering a contract. With months to live and no one to carry on his name, the CEO of Royce Innovations wanted an heir before his time ran out. What he didn't expect was that the woman he tried to purchase would become the one who would price him out of his own loneliness. He wanted a baby. He got a soul. He got twins and a love that brought him to his knees. But here's the real question. What happens when the woman he tried to use disappears after giving him everything? And what happens when the twins, the legacy he thought would save his name, force him to face the man he swore he'd never become? Before we begin, let me ask you this. Would you carry a stranger's child if you were promised a better life, but had to give up your heart to do it? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you believe in second chances, love beyond wealth, and legacies born from unexpected places, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe right now. This is Mr. Charles Stories. And the story we're about to tell might just change the way you see love, power, and purpose. The elevator hummed softly as it climbed toward the 35th floor of Royce Tower, a steel and glass needle piercing the clouds of Midtown Manhattan. Carissa exhaled slowly, pressing a hand against her chest, as if that might still the quiet thunder of her heartbeat. She had stepped inside 100 penthouses as a maid, but today was different. This time, she hadn't come to clean. This time, she had come to confront something, someone, that could change her life forever. When the doors opened with a chime, the silence nearly choked her. The air smelled of polish and wealth, imported wood oils, sterile glass, and the faintest scent of bergamot cologne. No music played, no voices, just the high-altitude hush of a home built for solitude, a gallery of silence where money echoed but love had never lived. Carissa's flats clicked softly against the marble as Stuart, Wilbert Royce's personal nurse, appeared at the corridor's end. He nodded without speaking and gestured toward a frosted glass door trimmed in black metal. "He's waiting for you in the drawing room," Stuart said, his voice low. Carissa gave a brief nod and moved forward, shoulders squared, her posture graceful but unyielding. Today, she would not be the help. She would not be dismissed with a polite smile or overlooked in a hallway. Today, she was walking into the lion's den on her own terms. The drawing room was vast and cold. Everything was modern, minimal, and heartbreakingly expensive. A marble fireplace dominated the wall, though no fire burned. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the breathtaking Manhattan skyline, but the city's lights only made the room feel colder, like a throne room in a kingdom no one wanted to rule. Wilbert Royce sat in a dark leather chair, back straight, legs crossed. He wore a grey silk robe and black house slippers. Though his body had withered from illness, his presence had not. His eyes, icy, unreadable, locked onto her the moment she entered. Sharp, controlled, dangerous in their stillness. "Miss Carissa," he said with a nod. "You read the documents." Carissa lifted the manila envelope from her bag and held it up. All 26 pages, the non-disclosure, the fertility clause, the payout structure, and the child custody terms. "Surrogacy agreement," Wilbert corrected. "No," she said calmly. "Custody terms. You're not hiring a surrogate, Mr. Royce. You're hiring a woman to carry your heir and disappear." He blinked. Just once. From the far corner, Vance, the silent, silver-haired lawyer who had delivered the documents, shifted slightly but said nothing. Wilbert's jaw flexed. I'm offering full compensation, lifelong financial stability, and an exit clause. You'll never want for anything again. And what will the child want for? She asked. Wilbert's brow creased, just slightly. Carissa stepped closer. Let me guess. You picture yourself holding your baby for a few photo ops, then handing him off to a boarding school in Switzerland while your name lives on in gold-plated philanthropy. That's not a legacy, Mr. Royce. That's marketing. He stared at her. Why did you come here if you're not interested? I didn't say I'm not interested, Carissa replied. I said I'm not for sale. The lawyer glanced between them, but Wilbert raised a hand. Leave us, Vance. Without argument, Vance retreated. Now it was just them, the dying billionaire and the woman he underestimated. Wilbert leaned forward slowly, wincing from the strain. You know I'm not well. You know time isn't on my side. What I offer is more than fair. If I die before the child is born, you'll still be cared for. I've already arranged a trust. Carissa tilted her head. And if you live, then I raise the child, he said, the way I choose. She studied him, then crossed her arms. You want an heir, not a family. You want a body to carry your name, not a person to raise it with you. Wilbert's lips tightened. You clean the homes of people who don't remember your name. That's true, she said, voice soft but sharp. But I sleep with peace in my chest. I earn my keep without selling my soul. That's more than some billionaires can say. Silence, thick and cold. Wilbert looked away for the first time, and then, with calm defiance, Carissa dropped the first emotional climax. I'll do it, she said. His eyes snapped back to hers. But, she added, I move in. I carry this child here, in this home. You want someone to bring you life? Let's see if you're capable of living with it first. The contract was redrafted that evening. Wilbert didn't argue. Vance returned with a new clause that allowed for shared residence and full parental access. Stuart, ever the quiet observer, simply nodded once as he took note of the new arrangement. Carissa didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, but because of what it meant. She wasn't just carrying a child. She was walking into the eye of a storm. But something in her gut told her she had the strength to survive it. She moved in the next morning. No grand suitcase, no designer bags, just 2 worn duffels, one holding clothes, the other holding books, vitamins, and a framed photo of her mother. The staff had been dismissed indefinitely, leaving only Stuart, Wilbert, and her. Her new suite was pristine and impersonal, a guest room decorated in ivory and navy, as though preparing for someone important but unknown. Carissa made it her own by laying her mother's picture on the dresser and arranging her books by the window. She ate her breakfast alone. She walked the halls alone. And Wilbert made no effort to interact. At dinner, he stayed in his office. At night, he coughed softly behind his closed door but never called out. Still, Carissa held her peace. She wasn't there to chase him. She was there to challenge him. On the 4th morning, she found him in the kitchen, standing in front of a pantry full of options, holding a jar of peanut butter. He looked at it like it was nuclear science. Carissa entered quietly, took it from his hand, popped it open, and placed it on the counter next to a loaf of fresh bread. You know, Wilbert said with a dry smile, I created the algorithm that predicts consumer behavior across 3 continents. Carissa picked up the bread, and yet the peanut butter still wins. They shared the smallest smile. It was the first time the air in the penthouse didn't feel like glass. From that moment on, small changes began to bloom. They ate breakfast near each other, never quite together, but close. She started playing old jazz records in the evenings, sometimes Coltrane, sometimes Ellington. One night, she caught him lingering in the hallway, just listening. A week passed. Then, too, he asked questions about her childhood, her father's silence, her dreams before she became a maid. She answered honestly, carefully. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't try to get close. That, somehow, brought them closer. When the fertility team arrived from Switzerland, everything moved with clockwork precision. She underwent embryo transfer under the best medical care money could buy. There was no romance, no warmth, just white coats, machines, gloves, charts. After the procedure, she was escorted back upstairs. Stuart helped her settle into bed with a firm pillow under her legs and a blanket tucked around her shoulders. That night, Wilbert didn't appear, but the next morning, a tray arrived outside her door, fresh strawberries, hot tea, prenatal vitamins, and a handwritten note on thick cream stationery. Thank you. I may not know what love looks like, but I know what sacrifice feels like. Wilbert Carissa read it once. Then she folded it, placed it in her journal, and whispered to herself, this might be more than a contract after all. The days that followed the procedure were quiet, delicate, like untouched snow. Carissa spent most of her time reading by the window or walking gentle laps around the upper floor, following the sunlight across the marble like a cat. Her body was adjusting, and so was her mind. She hadn't realized how much the silence could weigh when there was no chaos to balance it. Wilbert was more present now. He no longer vanished behind his office door for hours. Instead, he wandered, often aimlessly, through the halls like a man remembering what it meant to exist in a shared space. They talked over dinner now, sometimes at the long dining table and sometimes casually in the kitchen. Wilbert wasn't warm, but he wasn't cold either. He was thawing, slowly, hesitantly, like spring crawling across late winter ground. Carissa noticed, and she let him thaw. One afternoon she walked into the media room to find Wilbert watching a children's cartoon. Really? She teased, leaning against the doorframe. He didn't flinch. Research. For what? Diaper brand endorsement. For my own sanity, he said without looking up. I've been studying what children laugh at. She walked in and sat beside him. And what's the verdict? They laugh at everything, he said. Socks falling off, spoons dropping, a dog sneezing. Maybe that's the point. Joy in simplicity, he nodded. What did you laugh at when you were little? Carissa's smile faded into something thoughtful. My mama's singing. It was awful, but joyful. He looked at her for a long moment. I can't sing. I believe you. They both laughed. It was starting to feel dangerous, this warmth that kept sneaking into their edges. The pregnancy symptoms came on full force by week 6. Nausea, sore joints, fatigue. Carissa handled it with her usual grace, never asking for help, never complaining. Still, Wilbert noticed. He began adjusting meal plans to suit her cravings. He learned how to cut mango the way she liked. He made her ginger tea at midnight when he heard her pacing from the nausea. One night, she found him asleep in the library chair, holding a parenting book. Didn't peg you for the research type, she whispered as she draped a blanket over him. He stirred. Figured I should know what a car seat is before the baby arrives. Just one? She teased. You know there's a 50-50 chance of twins. Wilbert raised an eyebrow. Don't joke. I'm serious. Twins would kill me. Twins might save you. She didn't mean for her words to land so heavily, but they did. By week 8, they were walking the rooftop garden together in the evenings. The city spread below them like a sparkling sea of possibilities. Wilbert didn't talk much during these walks, but he always held the door open, always kept his pace beside hers, always waited at the stairs. One evening, she found him standing at the edge of the nursery room, the one that had sat unused for years. It was empty but had good bones, sunlight, hardwood floors, tall windows. I want it to feel safe, he said, almost to himself. Carissa stepped beside him. Not rich, not expensive, safe. He nodded. I never had that growing up. What did you have? He took a long breath. A father who only cared about numbers. A mother who died too soon. A company that grew faster than I could chase it. And silence. Carissa looked at him. Then you get to give them what you never had. Wilbert swallowed hard. You think I can? If you mean it, she said softly. Yes. By the second trimester, things had shifted. Wilbert was attending doctor's appointments with her. Stuart drove them, always patient, always a quiet witness to this strange but blossoming story. At the 13-week scan, Wilbert sat frozen in the corner as the sound of a tiny heartbeat filled the room. "That's real?" he whispered. Carissa reached for his hand without thinking. "Yes," she said. "That's life." It was the first time she saw tears gather in the corners of his eyes. Not grief, not pain, awe. By week 16, the nursery was coming together. Cream and sage green tones. A rocking chair near the window. Bookshelves already half full. Wilbert spent hours comparing crib models and debating bottle warmers like it was a Fortune 500 merger. "You're nesting," Carissa teased one evening. "I'm building something that doesn't ask for ROI, he replied. "You sure?" He grinned. "Maybe a little love return on investment." Let me know when you hit quarterly cuddle goals." They both laughed again. It was dangerous, this rhythm. They were becoming something, not lovers, not quite partners, but something more than strangers. One night, Carissa woke to a quiet knock. She opened the door to find Wilbert standing there barefoot, a blanket in hand. "I can't sleep," he said simply. "I keep thinking, what if I'm not alive when they come?" She stepped aside without a word. They sat on the couch in her suite, the blanket over both their laps. She didn't speak to fill the silence. She let him feel it, feel her presence in it. "You're scared," she said finally. "Yes." She turned to him. "Good. That means you care." He turned to her then, really turned to her. His hand, warm and shaking, found hers. "I don't know how to be a father." She squeezed gently. "Start by being here." They sat like that for a long time, fingers entwined, breathing synchronized. No kiss, no confession, just a man learning how to stay. The following morning, Stuart found them asleep on the couch, leaning into each other like two halves of a promise not yet spoken. He didn't say a word. He just covered them with the blanket they'd shared, and smiled. That afternoon, Carissa stood in front of the nursery window as the late autumn light slanted across her belly. The babies weren't showing yet, but she could feel them, flutters like butterfly wings brushing her from inside. Wilbert walked in holding 2 paint samples. "I need your opinion," he said. "Warm linen or pearl dawn?" Carissa turned, surprised. "You're actually asking?" "I've learned something," he said. "Most of my decisions have been cold, logical. But this needs to feel like love." She looked at the swatches. "Warm linen," she said. "Pearl dawn is too perfect." He smiled. "Exactly what I thought." As he walked out, she realized he didn't just want a child. He was becoming a father. That evening, over a bowl of vanilla pudding, Carissa looked at Wilbert across the kitchen island. "You know I still don't trust you," she said plainly. "I know," he said, "but I believe in what we're building." "So do I." She watched him for a moment. "If this turns into something more, if we become something, are you ready for that?" Wilbert met her gaze, steady and clear. "I think I already am." They didn't kiss that night, but she didn't sleep alone either. He fell asleep on the couch again. This time, she left him a pillow and a folded blanket, and a note. "You're doing better than you think." C. The mornings in Royce Tower changed, not with ceremony but with quiet, subtle revolutions. Where once there had been silence and servants who spoke only when spoken to, now there was jazz humming softly in the background. Where once breakfast was a private ritual for Wilbert, now it was a shared one. Him on one side of the long granite island, Carissa on the other, both sipping from mismatched mugs that neither of them cared to replace. Wilbert had gone from calling her Miss Carissa to simply Carissa, and even that name carried a gentleness now, a softness not typically found in billionaires' voices. The emotional distance between them had narrowed into something complicated. Not romance, not yet, but not duty either. It was an unraveling, a quiet dismantling of 2 tightly wound lives, and it was happening 1 heartbeat at a time. Wilbert began doing strange things, not for show, not for control, but for something much harder to admit: connection. He made her soup when the nausea returned. He researched foot rub techniques and awkwardly tried them with hands better suited to typing than tenderness. He even began tracking her cravings on his phone. Carissa didn't ask for any of it, which is precisely why it meant so much. One rainy afternoon, she walked into the den to find him wrestling with a stroller that had more parts than a spaceship. "Are you assembling that thing or fighting it?" she asked, eyebrow raised. He looked up, defeated. "This is a war." She chuckled, took over, and within 10 minutes had the whole contraption upright and snapping into place. Wilbert watched her with a look that lingered. "What?" she asked. "You're extraordinary." Carissa blinked. "Because I can work a stroller?" "No," he said softly. "Because you never ask for applause, and you deserve standing ovations." Wilbert had been a man who once timed conversations by the minute. Now he lost hours watching her read on the rooftop or listening to her hum while folding baby clothes. He couldn't name the moment the change began, only that it had taken root. He was still dying. The scans hadn't changed, but something else had. He no longer feared death. He feared not seeing this through. Janelle, Carissa's sister, visited the penthouse unannounced one Saturday morning. She strutted in like she owned the place, sunglasses on indoors, earrings swinging, attitude on 100. "Where is he?" she asked. "Wilbert." Carissa blinked. "He's painting the nursery." Janelle's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly met her braids. "He's what?" Carissa laughed. "He said it's cheaper than therapy." Janelle snorted. "Therapy for billionaires is marriage to the maid, apparently." "Stop," Carissa warned, though her smile betrayed her amusement. Moments later, Wilbert appeared, smeared in sage green paint, a speck on his cheek, a roller in hand. Janelle stared. He nodded politely. "You must be Janelle. I've heard a lot." "I bet you have." She folded her arms. "Heard I don't trust men with money or silk robes." Wilbert's lips twitched. "Only fair. I don't trust anyone who wears sunglasses indoors." The room held still. Then Janelle burst out laughing. "Okay," she said. "You're not a complete robot." "Good to know." After Janelle left, Carissa sat on the balcony, arms wrapped around her growing belly. The babies were moving more now, little nudges like fingers tapping on the inside of her skin. Wilbert joined her with 2 mugs of cocoa. "Your sister's protective," he said. "She's my spine when mine buckles," Carissa replied. "She's earned her place." He nodded. "She called me a robot." "She's earned that too." Wilbert smiled, but there was something behind it. Something almost nervous. "Carissa, I'm not asking you to love me, but I need you to know. I'm learning what it means to love someone else." She turned to him, surprised. "You think you're in love?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know I care where your joy lives. I know I listen to you even when you don't speak. And I know I don't want to die without giving you a better story than the one I started." Her heart twisted. She didn't answer. She just reached for his hand and let it rest on her belly where 2 lives stirred beneath his touch. Later that night, Carissa found a note under her pillow. "They say legacy is what we leave behind, but I think legacy is who we love before we go. Thank you for letting me learn that. W." By month 5, the world inside the penthouse had transformed. Wilbert had finished painting the nursery. Carissa had taught him how to fold onesies, pack a diaper bag, and argue gently with customer service agents. He had taught her how to let someone take care of her without suspicion. And that might have been the biggest change of all. One warm afternoon, Carissa stepped out of the shower to find Wilbert placing new towels on the rack, freshly laundered and still warm. "I was going to do that," she said. "I know," he said, "but I needed to do something useful today." She laughed. "You own half of Manhattan, and none of that helps when someone you love needs something real." She froze. Wilbert realized what he'd said. "Wilbert, I'm not asking you to say it back," he said quickly. "Just let me mean it." She didn't respond. She just kissed his cheek, softly, and walked away before he could see her eyes water. In that moment, he didn't chase her. Because for the first time in his life, Wilbert Royce knew love wasn't about having. It was about holding, gently, even from a distance. The nursery smelled of baby powder and fresh paint, warm linen on the walls, sage green crib linens, and shelves filled with board books Carissa had picked out and Wilbert had alphabetized. Light filtered through gauzy curtains, soft and golden, casting gentle patterns across the room where hope had finally decided to take residence. Wilbert stood at the window, holding a baby monitor he didn't know how to use yet. His fingers fumbled with the buttons, and Carissa watched from the rocking chair with a soft smile curling at her lips. "You know that thing doesn't work until there are actual babies to monitor, right?" she teased. "I'm preparing." "For what?" "Fatherhood," he said simply, turning to face her. Carissa looked down at her belly. It was round now, real. She could no longer deny the fullness of what was happening, not just inside her womb, but inside their lives. "Some people prepare with books," she said. "You bought gadgets. Gadgets don't talk back," Wilbert muttered. "Babies will." She laughed. "So will I." He chuckled, walked over, and kneeled at her feet. Then, "I'd better keep learning." By the end of the second trimester, the babies had become undeniable. 2 thumping heartbeats, 2 sets of fluttering limbs visible on ultrasound. Stuart drove them to the appointment and waited patiently in the hallway, as Wilbert and Carissa sat hand in hand, watching the grainy monitor display their future. "Twins," the doctor confirmed with a grin. "Healthy, strong, and already keeping each other company." Carissa blinked back tears. Wilbert didn't blink at all. He stared at the screen as if the sound of 2 heartbeats had cracked something inside him wide open. 2, not 1. 2. One looked like him, sharp cheekbones and long limbs. The other seemed smaller, curled tighter. Maya and Malik, he thought quietly. They didn't know the genders yet, but those names felt right, even now. Carissa squeezed his hand. "You okay?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, He stopped. Tried again. "I thought I was building a legacy. Turns out, I'm meeting one." Back at the penthouse, he moved differently. Slower, softer. He spent more time in the nursery, alone, quietly humming songs he couldn't remember the lyrics to. One night, Carissa caught him holding a baby sock like it was made of glass, whispering words she didn't understand. She didn't interrupt. Some grief only unfolds in solitude. Janelle visited again, this time with purpose. She barged into the kitchen, while Wilbert was flipping pancakes, and said, "You got a moment, Mr. Baby Billionaire?" Carissa, already at the counter, tried not to spit her juice, laughing. Wilbert gave Janelle his signature raised eyebrow. "Do I get to keep my title if I burn these?" "Depends," she said, pulling out a chair. "On whether you're for real or playing house." Wilbert turned off the stove. He set the pan down, took off his apron, and sat across from her. "I've never been more real," he said. "And trust me, I've signed billion-dollar deals. This is harder." Janelle narrowed her eyes. "What happens when the babies cry all night, and Carissa's too tired to talk?" "I'll hold them. And when she doubts herself, I'll remind her she's magic. And when she wants to run, I'll let her, and stay close enough for her to find me again." Janelle blinked, then nodded once. "Okay then." And just like that, she was in his corner. Later that week, Carissa found Wilbert in the nursery again, fiddling with the mobile above the crib. "You always in here?" He looked up. "It's the only room that doesn't feel like death." She paused. That was honest. He walked over to her. "I used to live in a glass castle. Pretty to look at, empty to live in. But this room, it has weight, breath." He rested a hand gently on her belly. "Life." She placed her hand over his. "You're not the man I met that first day." "I hope not, and I'm not the same either." "Good," he whispered. "Because I fell for this version." Her breath caught. "Wilbert, I'm not rushing you," he said quickly. I want you to know that when these babies come, whatever we are, wherever we are, I'll be here. Fully." "I know," she said, voice trembling. "And that's what scares me." That night, a thunderstorm rolled through Manhattan, loud and blinding. Carissa woke with a gasp, heart racing. Seconds later, there was a soft knock at her door. "Can I come in?" Wilbert asked. She nodded, already reaching for the blanket beside her. He climbed in beside her, not to touch, not to hold, just to be. "Scared?" he asked after a long silence. "Not of the storm. Then what?" "Of loving someone who might not stay. I'm not leaving," he said. "Not by choice, and not without leaving love behind. That's bigger than my absence." She turned to him, face close. "You promise?" He kissed her forehead. "With every heartbeat I have left," and she let herself sleep finally, in the crook of an arm that had once only known how to push people away. The next morning, Stuart found them curled together, limbs tangled, the babies kicking softly beneath Carissa's hand. He didn't say a word. He just closed the door gently behind him. The world outside moved fast, horns blaring, sirens flashing, people chasing seconds like coins tossed into a fountain. But inside the penthouse, time slowed, softened, became something sacred. Carissa awoke each morning to a rhythm that felt less like obligation and more like belonging. Jazz hummed through the halls again, this time not hers but Wilbert's. He'd found her playlist, memorized her favorites, and started playing them on his own. Stuart had stopped asking if Wilbert needed assistance down the stairs. He watched as the man who once clung to his own power now walked himself into the kitchen, one careful step at a time, with a towel over his shoulder and herbal tea already steeping in a clay mug. Even Vance, the uptight lawyer who had drafted their original agreement, had softened his tone during a surprise visit. He noted how Wilbert no longer barked out directives but asked questions, listened, smiled. Something had bloomed, and everyone who saw it knew. One morning, Carissa stepped out of the elevator and into the living room to find Wilbert pacing nervously in front of a white bassinet. "Did I do this right?" he asked, gesturing toward the newly assembled piece. Carissa walked over, examined the bolts, the frame, and the mattress insert. "You did this?" "Alone," he said. "Took me 4 hours. You followed the manual?" He gave her a sheepish grin. Eventually, she shook her head and smiled. "You did good." Wilbert looked at her for a long moment. "Can I ask something personal?" Carissa tilted her head. "What happens if I don't make it? If the babies only know me through stories and photos?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out a small journal, the same one she wrote in every night. She opened to a page, torn halfway out, and handed it to him. He read it silently. "Dear Maya and Malik, today your father spilled oatmeal on himself trying to surprise me with breakfast." He cursed under his breath, but then he laughed. It was the first time I saw him laugh without pain, and in that laugh, I saw hope. Wilbert's throat tightened. "I write one every day," she said, "so they'll always know the truth, not just what you were, but who you became." He stepped forward, overcome. "You still call me their father. You are." At 24 weeks, the babies began kicking with full force. Carissa would gasp mid-conversation, her hand flying to her belly. Sometimes Wilbert's hand followed. "Was that Maya or Malik?" He'd ask with childlike awe. She'd smile. "I think that was Malik. He's got rhythm and—" "Maya?" "She moves in circles," Carissa laughed, "like she's trying to dance and lead at the same time." Wilbert shook his head in amazement. "You're making real people." "No," she corrected gently. "We are." They visited the pediatric wing of the hospital one weekend for a prenatal parenting class. Wilbert wore a dark baseball cap and hoodie, trying not to draw attention. But it didn't matter. The room didn't see a billionaire. They saw a man with trembling hands trying to swaddle a foam baby while the woman beside him whispered encouragement. Carissa noticed how he didn't ask for shortcuts, didn't roll his eyes, didn't delegate. He was present, completely. Back at the penthouse, Wilbert started waking earlier than her. He would leave fresh-cut fruit on the nightstand, a note with dad jokes, sometimes silly sketches of 2 babies climbing a mountain made of waffles. I think they'll have your sense of humor, he said one morning, handing her tea with honey. You hope, she replied, sipping with a smile. I pray. Carissa froze slightly at the word. He noticed. What? You pray? I started, he said simply. Every night. She didn't ask to whom. She didn't need to. One night, Carissa couldn't sleep. She walked the hallway barefoot, belly full of movement, mind full of memories. Wilbert found her in the kitchen, eating cereal straight from the box. You okay? Just thinking. He walked over, placed a hand on her back. I'm not going anywhere, he said quietly. Even if my body does, my heart, it stays here. Carissa turned to him. I believe that, and for the first time, she let herself believe in something more than just survival. She believed in staying. The next day, Wilbert showed her the crib he'd painted himself. I wanted something they'd sleep in with their names already written, he said, pointing to the headboards. Carissa stepped closer. On one side, Malik, strength in spirit; on the other, Maya, light in motion. She reached out to trace the letters, tears blurring her vision. They already have more than most kids get in a lifetime, she whispered. Because of you. No, she said, turning to him. Because of us. That evening, they danced in the nursery. No music, just their breaths, their movements, their joy. Wilbert held her gently, swaying side to side, hands on her lower back, lips near her ear. If this is all I get, he whispered, I've already had everything. And Carissa, resting her head on his shoulder, whispered back, Then let's make it count. Weeks passed in golden rhythm. Carissa's belly grew, her hips softened, and her glow lit the halls of the penthouse like a candle that wouldn't dim. Her presence was no longer that of a guest or a housemaid. She was the rhythm of the home, the heartbeat that made the cold marble breathe. Wilbert's health, while still precarious, had stabilized. His appetite returned in bursts, his weight crept up by pounds, and the color in his face no longer looked ghosted. Stuart ran weekly vitals, carefully tracking what Wilbert dismissed as irrelevant numbers, but even the old nurse couldn't hide his surprise. You're improving, he muttered one morning. Wilbert shrugged. Guess love's harder to kill than cancer. Carissa, listening from the doorway, smiled quietly to herself. They had developed routines that no contract could have predicted. Morning cocoa and mango slices on the balcony. Midday walks through the nursery while discussing baby names, nicknames, and hypothetical bedtime stories. Evenings curled together, not always speaking, but always touching, a hand on a shoulder, fingers tracing soft circles on a wrist, her head on his chest, listening to a heart that had once been stone. Wilbert no longer timed his day around business calls or legal briefs. He measured his hours by how many times the twins kicked, how many times Carissa smiled, and how long he could stretch moments before they ended. On a sunny Wednesday, they went for a walk in Central Park. Stuart accompanied them discreetly, always a few steps behind. Wilbert insisted on holding Carissa's hand, though she told him she was fine. You're pregnant with my children, he reminded her. I'm not porcelain. Doesn't mean I won't hold you like you're sacred. The words hit her deeper than he knew. They walked slowly, stopping often. Wilbert pointed out pigeons and horses, like he was seeing them for the first time. Carissa watched him, really watched him, and for the first time wondered what life would be like if he truly beat the odds, if the doctors were wrong, if he lived, if she could choose to love him not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Later that night, they sat on the rooftop. The moon hung low, thick and golden, like it was blessing the city with quiet. Carissa leaned into him, hands folded on her stomach. Wilbert traced light patterns on her arm. Do you ever think, he said, that we were meant to meet like this? She smiled. Like you hiring me to carry your child? Like life knowing we'd only slow down if it smacked us into each other? Carissa chuckled. I think we were two wounded people who stopped pretending we were whole. And now, she turned to him. Now we're healing. He kissed her, slowly, tenderly, as if memorizing her breath. It was their first kiss. And it didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like an answer. The next morning, Carissa woke with Wilbert's arm draped over her belly, the babies kicking gently beneath his hand. He stirred, blinked and whispered, "They're saying good morning." She laughed. "Or demanding waffles." He grinned. "That's my girl, already raising rebels." The next doctor's appointment confirmed what they already knew: the twins were thriving. Heart rates are perfect. "Growth is steady," the doctor said. Wilbert looked at Carissa, his eyes brighter than she'd ever seen. "They're strong," he whispered. "Because they come from strong people," she replied. He kissed her temple in front of everyone, and no one blinked. Not even Stuart. Back at the penthouse, they celebrated with music. Wilbert danced like a man whose bones had forgotten pain. Carissa swayed like someone learning to trust her joy. They laughed when he tripped over a pillow. They cried when he recited a lullaby he found in his late mother's journal. And when the music faded, they stood holding each other in the quiet. No declarations, no drama, just two people who had found something rare. A love that didn't announce itself, it arrived quietly. And bloomed. The days rolled into weeks like the gentle rocking of a cradle, steady and warm. The nursery was finished, complete with names hand-painted above the cribs, a mobile of soft stars spinning lazily overhead, and a bookshelf already overflowing with bedtime stories. Wilbert woke each morning with a purpose, not out of obligation, but anticipation. He no longer looked like a dying man, but a man afraid of missing even a second of life. He was learning how to swaddle without YouTube tutorials, folding onesies with military precision, and even practicing lullabies with a voice that cracked but never quit. Carissa was glowing, tired, swollen, and undeniably radiant. She had accepted his hand, not just in assistance, but in presence. He was no longer her employer. He was the father of her children. And maybe, just maybe, something even deeper. But peace, Wilbert had learned, was delicate. It arrived slowly, and left like a thief. It started on a Wednesday. Carissa was in the kitchen, humming to herself while stirring cinnamon into her oatmeal. Wilbert had just returned from his morning checkup with Stuart and was unusually quiet. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "You've been quiet all morning," she said without turning. "Bad news?" Wilbert cleared his throat. "Not bad, just not great." She looked up. Spoon paused mid-air. "Wilbert." He walked to her slowly, took the bowl from her hand and set it down. "The cancer hasn't spread," he said. "But it's not shrinking either." Carissa's face didn't flinch, but her hand reached for his. "What does that mean?" He hesitated. "It means I might be here longer than expected, or not. There's no timeline anymore. Just waiting." She nodded. "Then we wait together." He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for weeks. Later that day, Stuart pulled Carissa aside. "He's improving in small ways," he told her. "He's not bedridden. His vitals are stronger than last quarter. But he's still fragile, emotionally and physically." Carissa looked through the glass doors, where Wilbert sat reading to her belly, his voice low, steady. "He's stronger than he lets on," she said softly. "Because of you," Stuart replied. That evening, they went out onto the rooftop garden. The air was crisp, the sky clear. Wilbert had brought out 2 blankets and Carissa's favorite tea. They sat under string lights that Wilbert insisted on installing himself, despite Stuart's objections. "Look at us," Carissa said, "sipping tea under fairy lights like we're in a rom-com." Wilbert chuckled. "I like rom-coms." "You're lying." "Maybe." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You ever think this wasn't supposed to happen?" "You mean us?" "Yeah." He paused. "Every day. And then I realize everything else in my life felt manufactured. This feels earned." She looked at him. "Even with the contract?" He smiled. "Especially with the contract. Because you didn't just carry my legacy, you rewrote it." The next morning, Carissa woke to a sharp pain low in her abdomen. At first, she brushed it off as stretching. Braxton Hicks, maybe dehydration, but the second wave made her cry out. Wilbert rushed in before she could sit up. "Carissa?" It's okay. I think." She doubled over, clutching her side. "No, something's wrong." Stuart was there in seconds. his years of experience kicking in like muscle memory. Hospital. Now. The drive to Lenox Hill was a blur. Wilbert held her hand the entire time, whispering reassurance while hiding the tremble in his own voice. "Stay with me," he kept saying. "Stay with me, Carissa. I'm not leaving," she breathed. "I'm not—" Another contraction. Wilbert's jaw clenched. "Please, God." They arrived at the emergency wing with a team waiting. Stuart had called ahead. Carissa was rushed into labor and delivery, while Wilbert stood frozen at the double doors. For the first time in months, he felt powerless again. He didn't have a cure. He didn't have control. He only had prayer. After what felt like a lifetime, a nurse returned. "Mr. Royce?" He snapped his head up. "She's stable. The babies are stable. They stopped the labor. But she'll need to stay for monitoring. At least a week." Wilbert nearly collapsed from the relief. "Can I see her?" Of course. When he entered the room, Carissa was pale but alert. Her eyes met his, tired but sharp. "False alarm?" she asked. "Scary alarm," he whispered, sitting beside her. "But they're okay." "You're okay." She took his hand. "I thought I was losing them." "Never," he said. "Not on my watch." A tear slipped down her cheek. "They're real, Wilbert. Not just names, not just dreams." He kissed her knuckles. "I know. I've heard them. I've felt them." She turned her face to him. "Promise me you'll still be here when they open their eyes." He didn't hesitate. "I swear." Back at the penthouse that night, Wilbert stood in the nursery alone. The light from the hallway made the mobile spin slowly. The room smelled like lavender and fresh cotton. He looked at the two cribs and felt his knees give way. He sat on the floor, pulled his knees to his chest, and wept. Not because he was afraid, but because he knew if anything happened to her, to them, his entire life would unravel again. And this time, he wouldn't survive it. The hospital room had become Carissa's new world, a sterile cocoon filled with monitors, gentle beeping, nurses moving like shadows, and the occasional soft knock before someone entered. But even with all that, it wasn't the machines or doctors that comforted her. It was him. Wilbert hadn't left her side, not for a meeting, not for a phone call, not even to sleep. He brought her mango slices in the mornings, rubbed her ankles at noon, and read to her belly in the evenings. He wasn't just showing up. He was staying, and that, more than anything, told her who he truly was. "You're exhausted," she said softly one night, watching him doze upright in the chair beside her bed. "I'm good," he muttered without opening his eyes. "You're lying." He smiled. "Maybe, but I'd rather be tired next to you than well-rested without you." She blinked away the tears. "You keep saying things like that. I might actually fall for you." He opened his eyes then, fully alert. "Carissa." She shook her head. "Not yet. But you're getting close." 2 days into her hospital stay, Janelle walked in with a bag of food, a change of clothes, and a raised eyebrow. "I'm not saying I'm impressed," she began, eyeing Wilbert, "but this man has literally missed board meetings for you." Carissa looked surprised. "Seriously?" Wilbert nodded. "My assistant nearly fainted." Janelle grinned. "He might be worth keeping." Carissa rolled her eyes. "He's not a purse, Janelle." "No," Wilbert said. "But I'll be here when she's ready to hold on." Janelle's lips curled into a smirk. "He's good. He's better," Carissa corrected. Later that night, Carissa asked the question she'd avoided for months. "Do you think we're making a mistake?" Wilbert turned toward her. "You mean us?" She nodded. "This didn't start with love. It started with desperation." He reached for her hand, warm and steady. "Desperation brought us together, but love is what's growing now." Alongside Maya and Malik, she smiled faintly. "You said their names." "I whisper them when you're asleep," he admitted. She leaned back against her pillow, eyes closing. "I think they already know your voice." Back at the penthouse, Stuart and Vance sat in the study, reviewing Wilbert's latest medical reports. Stuart tapped the file. His numbers are holding, not improving, but not declining either. Vance raised an eyebrow. "You think she's the reason?" Stuart leaned back. I think purpose is a better medicine than any pill I've given him. Vance glanced at the wedding invitation draft that sat unopened on Wilbert's desk. He smiled faintly. Then we better hope he holds on to her. The next morning, Wilbert arrived early with her favorite pastry and an awkward grin. "What's that face?" Carissa asked. He shrugged. "I have a question and a surprise." Oh boy. He pulled out a small white envelope and handed it to her. She opened it carefully. Inside was a black and white photo, 2 tiny feet side by side, caught on a 3D scan. "They look like yours," she whispered. "I was hoping they'd get your heart." She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "And the question?" He pulled out a velvet box. "I know this started as a transaction. I know it's become something we can't quite name. But I also know there's no future I want without you in it." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, not flashy, not oversized, but elegant, with 2 small diamonds split by a single sapphire. "Will you consider building forever with me?" Carissa stared at him. Then the tears came, hot, fast, and relentless. "I'm not saying yes yet," she whispered. "I know, but I'm not saying no." He smiled, slipped the box back into his pocket, and leaned forward. "Then I'll wait," he whispered. "As long as it takes." Her hospital discharge came 2 days later. Doctors confirmed both babies were fine, but emphasized rest and limited movement. Carissa returned to the penthouse with Wilbert beside her, hand at the small of her back, supporting but never crowding. Janelle helped her settle into the guest bedroom temporarily, just until the new adjustable bed arrived for comfort. The first night back, Carissa wandered into the nursery around midnight. The moon poured in through the windows, like spilled milk. She stood at the crib, running her hand along the smooth wood. "They're okay," Wilbert said softly from the doorway. She turned. "I know, but I think I needed to stand here and feel it." He walked over, placed his hands on her hips, and leaned down until his forehead rested against hers. "You're allowed to be scared. I'm just not used to being allowed to feel held." "Then let me keep holding you." And there, in the middle of a nursery built on second chances, she let herself rest in his arms. The next morning, Carissa found a new note taped to the fridge. "Day 1, I want to be your safe place. Day 2, I want to be your soft place. Day 3, I just want to be yours." She pressed the note to her chest and exhaled. Maybe it hadn't started with love, but it was being rewritten by it. Every single day. The morning sun filtered through the nursery blinds, painting gentle gold lines across the floor. Wilbert sat in the rocking chair with one hand resting on Carissa's belly, his other hand holding a baby book upside down, pretending to read aloud. Carissa lay on the nearby daybed, eyes half closed, watching him with an amused smirk. "You know the book's upside down, right?" she asked. He glanced down. "I was just testing if they noticed." Carissa chuckled. "They're not even out yet. They're Royce babies. I expect them to be geniuses. Right now, they expect you to stop talking and get me more apple slices." Wilbert stood with a mock sigh, demanding like their mother. "And you love it?" He paused at the doorway, looking back at her, his eyes soft. "I really do." That same afternoon, they returned to the hospital for a standard checkup. Everything had been calm for weeks. Carissa's vitals were strong, the twins were growing beautifully, and Wilbert had been showing small but steady signs of physical stability. His oncologist called it anomalous. Stuart called it Carissa's effect, but no one was prepared for what happened next. Carissa lay on the exam table as the sonographer guided the probe gently across her belly. The screen lit up with the familiar flickers, 2 heartbeats, 2 heads, 2 curled sets of limbs. Wilbert watched intently, hand gripped around hers. Then the technician paused, zoomed in, frowned. "What is it?" Wilbert asked. She didn't respond at first. Then just, "Give me one moment. I'm going to call the doctor in." Carissa's grip tightened on Wilbert's. "Talk to me," she said. "What's wrong?" The doctor entered moments later, eyes already scanning the monitor. After a tense silence, he spoke. "There's some fluid accumulating near baby A's heart. Malik's. It may be a minor issue, But we want to run a fetal echocardiogram to be safe. Wilbert's throat closed. Carissa froze. Is it life-threatening? She whispered. Not at the moment, the doctor said gently. But we need to monitor it very closely. The next 3 days were a blur of appointments, specialists and tears behind closed doors. Carissa tried to stay strong, eating when she could, praying when she couldn't. Wilbert became her shadow, fielding calls, bringing tea, and refusing to leave her side, even for board meetings or doctor appointments of his own. Janelle came by with meals and jokes, trying to lighten the weight that clung to the penthouse like fog, but nothing made it go away. Until that Friday morning. Wilbert stood beside the crib in the nursery, a folded blanket in his hands, staring down at the space he had built for his son. Malik, his son. He hadn't held him yet, hadn't heard him cry or seen him smile, but he already loved him, and that love terrified him more than cancer ever could. Carissa walked in quietly. She didn't speak, just stood beside him, and slipped her hand into his. He broke. The blanket fell to the floor as he sank to his knees. I can't lose him, he whispered. I can't lose either of them, or you. Carissa knelt with him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. You won't, she said. You don't know that. I don't, she admitted. But I know what we can do. We can stay. We can fight. We can love them through every heartbeat. He buried his face in her lap and wept. She ran her fingers through his hair and whispered prayers over him, ones her mother used to say when they were small and afraid of storms. The next fetal scan brought the second emotional climax. Carissa lay still as the technician performed the echocardiogram. The room was so quiet it felt sacred. Wilbert sat beside her, holding her hand like an anchor. After several minutes, the technician smiled. Looks like the fluid is reducing. Carissa blinked. What? The doctor entered a few moments later to confirm. It's not gone yet, but the pressure around the heart has decreased significantly. This is a good sign. Wilbert looked at Carissa. She looked at him. They didn't say anything. They just exhaled, together. That evening, Wilbert returned to the rooftop garden with 2 cups of warm cider. The city sparkled around them, but neither paid it much attention. Carissa sat curled under a blanket, legs tucked to her side. Wilbert handed her the mug and sat close. They're fighters, he said. So are we, she replied. I thought, when I started this journey, I was buying security, a name, a legacy. And now, I'm building a home, he said softly. Carissa turned to him. You already have one. They didn't kiss that night. They simply held hands as the wind brushed through Carissa's curls and the twins rolled beneath her skin, pressing into their joined palms as if responding to the love blooming around them. The next day, they woke early. Wilbert made pancakes, burnt slightly, but she ate them anyway. Carissa sat on the kitchen stool, watching him. Can I ask you something real? He nodded. If I hadn't agreed to carry your child, would you have ever noticed me? He turned slowly. Yes, he said. Eventually. Because the way you carry yourself, Carissa, it doesn't let you stay invisible for long. She smiled. You're sure? I noticed you long before I had the courage to see you. That night, Wilbert lit candles throughout the nursery. Not for show, but for ritual. Carissa walked in to find him kneeling between the 2 cribs, whispering. She stood at the door, silent. He looked up. I was praying. To who? To whoever's listening. She stepped closer. What did you say? That if Malik and Maya come into this world safely, I'll spend every breath I have left making sure they never question their worth. Carissa touched his face gently. They already know they're loved. Because they know you. He pulled her into an embrace, burying his face in her neck. Stay with me, he whispered. Always, she replied. And in that moment, the day that had threatened to split them open became the day that pulled them even closer. The next morning brought calm skies and crisp air. Carissa sat in the nursery window seat, sipping warm lemon water while Wilbert massaged her feet with almond oil, his fingers slow and careful. Did I ever tell you I used to hate touching people? He asked, not looking up. She smiled. No, but I'm not surprised. I thought intimacy was a transaction. That physical closeness was for people with nothing to lose. And now? He looked up, his eyes clear. Now I know touch can be sacred, a kind of prayer. Carissa blinked, surprised. Who are you? He chuckled. Just a man who's falling in love with every version of you. She didn't say anything, but she didn't have to. The way she leaned forward and touched his cheek said enough. Wilbert's oncologist called later that day. His numbers had stabilized for the third consecutive test. It's not remission, the doctor warned, but it's definitely progress. Miraculous, even. Wilbert ended the call and stood in the middle of the hallway, unsure what to do. He didn't cheer. He didn't cry. He just walked straight to Carissa, lifted her into his arms and held her until his knees gave out and they both sat cradled on the floor, hearts thudding in unison. At week 31, Carissa's contractions returned. Real this time. There was no mistaking the rhythm, no false alarms, no confusion. She was in labor. Stuart helped Wilbert guide her down the elevator, holding her hand as she breathed through the waves. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but I'm here." The hospital was ready. The staff remembered them. The twins were premature, yes, but healthy and strong, and more than ready to meet the world. The delivery room was filled with tension and quiet strength. Carissa labored through gritted teeth, sweat on her brow, pain pulsing through her body like a storm. Wilbert never left her side. "You're doing this," he kept whispering. "You're bringing them home." "I can't," she cried out. "You are," he insisted, pressing his forehead to hers. "You are." And then the moment came. First, a cry. Sharp, strong, male. "Baby A," the nurse called. Wilbert's heart stopped. "Malik," he breathed. Then moments later, another cry. Softer, but steady. "Baby B," the nurse said. "A girl." "Maya," Carissa whispered through tears. Wilbert watched in stunned silence as they were cleaned, swaddled, and placed in separate bassinets. His knees buckled as the nurse motioned for him to step closer. "You want to meet your children, Mr. Royce?" He nodded like a child, stepping forward slowly. Malik looked just like him, same brow, same chin. Maya had Carissa's eyes. Deep, dark, curious. He reached out, one trembling hand per bassinet, and touched both of them at the same time. His body shook. His chest ached. And then he collapsed into the nearby chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Not from pain, but from joy so big it cracked him open. Carissa lay in bed, exhausted but glowing. "They're here," Wilbert whispered, sitting beside her. "I know," she replied. "I felt it. They're perfect." She smiled. "So are you?" He shook his head. "No. But I think they might teach me how to be." Carissa reached out and took his hand. "Then let's learn together." Back at the penthouse, the nursery had been transformed. No longer a space for dreams, it was now a room of life. Maya and Malik slept side by side, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Stuart tiptoed in and out with bottles and blankets. Janelle stood guard like a lioness, daring anyone to disturb their peace. Wilbert and Carissa, however, did not sleep. They stayed up for the first 3 nights, just watching, learning, touching, becoming. On the 4th morning, Wilbert walked into the study, pulled out a folder from the safe, and handed it to Vance. "What's this?" the lawyer asked. "My final amendment," Wilbert replied. Inside, legal documentation declaring Carissa his life partner, granting her equal parental rights, and splitting his estate between her and the twins. Vance blinked. "This is everything," Wilbert nodded. "Because they are." That evening, Carissa found Wilbert on the balcony, watching the city lights. She stepped beside him, wrapped in a robe, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm full," he whispered, "with things I used to think didn't matter." She leaned into him. Like first cries, soft cheeks, your laughter. The sound of Maya snoring already. Carissa smiled. "She takes after you." He turned, brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I don't know how much time I have." "We never did," But I know this, however long it is, I want it with you. And this time, when he kissed her, it wasn't slow. It was certain. It was forever in a single breath. Have you ever watched your entire world shift with one heartbeat? Whether it was the birth of your child, a moment of near loss, or a second chance you never saw coming, those moments change everything. Tell us in the comments. What moment in your life changed everything? Who or what pulled you back from the edge? Your story might give someone else the courage to keep going. And if you believe in love that transforms, in family born from more than blood, and in legacy that begins with humility, like this video, share it with someone who survived a turning point. Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more unforgettable tales that move the soul. Because sometimes, the real story begins the day everything changes. Wilbert awoke to the smell of baby powder and the sound of soft whimpering. Maya, probably. She always stirred first. Malik followed, his cries a few seconds behind hers, like clockwork. It had become a familiar rhythm, and somehow, it grounded him. He turned toward the crib and smiled, but the crib was empty. He sat up, frowning. His chest tightened, not with illness, but instinct. The nursery door was cracked open. The house was too quiet, too still. He stood quickly, heart thudding, and checked the adjoining rooms. The diaper caddy, the rocker, the bottles on the drying rack, everything in place, everything, except them. Carissa, Maya, Malik, gone. A single envelope lay on the kitchen counter. Wilbert knew that envelope. He had once sent one just like it to Carissa through his lawyer, but now it was addressed to him. No logo, no return address, just his name in her handwriting. He opened it with shaking fingers. Inside were 2 birth certificates. Father, Wilbert Royce, and one note. Short, heavy. If you want to know them, know us. Come as Wilbert the man, not the billionaire. Carissa. The weight of it dropped him to his knees. For 2 hours, Wilbert didn't move. Not even Stuart's voice could break through. She's gone, he whispered. Stuart crouched beside him. She left you the path back. She took my children. No, Stuart said gently. She took herself. The children are still yours, but only if you show up as you. No suits, no contracts, just heart. Wilbert pressed the envelope to his chest. And then he stood. I'm going to find them. It didn't take long. Carissa hadn't run away. She had simply gone home, to Queens, to a modest walk-up apartment, just big enough for 3. No nannies, no security, no chef. Just 2 cribs side by side in a sunny second bedroom, a rocking chair by the window, and a fridge stocked with formula and homemade ginger lemonade. When Wilbert knocked on her door, she didn't answer right away. He waited. 30 minutes. Then an hour, until finally it creaked open. She stood there in a loose tee and leggings, hair in a scarf, Maya in her arms. Hi, she said. He swallowed the lump in his throat. I'd like to know them. She stepped aside, but said nothing. The apartment smelled like shea butter and baby wipes. Wilbert stepped inside slowly, like a man walking through holy ground. Malik lay cooing in a bassinet nearby, cheeks round, eyes blinking up at the ceiling fan with fascination. He bent to his knees beside the baby. Hi, he whispered. Malik blinked, then smiled. It wrecked him. That night, Carissa let him stay on the couch. No conversation, no promises, just space and presence. Wilbert didn't complain. He held Maya during feedings, changed Malik's diaper with shaking hands, and rocked both babies until his back ached and his eyes blurred. Carissa watched from the doorway, arms folded. He didn't see her. He was too focused on Malik's hiccups, too engrossed in Maya's yawn. But she saw him, and something inside her softened. The next morning, Wilbert made breakfast, burnt toast, watery eggs, cold coffee. Carissa laughed as she spit out a bite. You're awful at this. He grinned. But I showed up. You did. And I'll keep showing up. Her eyes narrowed. Even without the penthouse, he nodded. Even with nothing but this couch. She didn't answer, but she handed him the baby bottle. 3 days turned into a week into 2. Wilbert never asked to return to the penthouse. He didn't talk about money. He just stayed. He helped clean bottles, folded tiny laundry, learned to braid Maya's wispy curls under Janelle's judgmental gaze, and read bedtime stories with voices that made Carissa laugh from the other room. He was different, not perfect, but real, and she could feel herself falling again, this time without resistance. On the 14th night, they sat on the floor, backs against the wall, babies finally asleep. Carissa leaned her head on his shoulder. "I didn't leave to punish you," she said. "I know. I left to protect them from becoming accessories in your legacy. I understand." She looked at him. "But you came anyway." "I didn't come for them," he said, voice low. "I came for you. And found us." A long pause. Then, "Do you love me, Wilbert?" He turned to her, eyes glassy. "I love the way you breathe. I love the way you fight. I love the way you see the man I didn't know I could be." She blinked. "That's a yes?" He kissed her forehead. "That's a forever." Wilbert awoke before sunrise to the sound of Carissa softly singing in the next room. It wasn't a lullaby, at least not one he recognized. It was slow, low, and warm, more like a hum tangled with memory. He didn't move. He just listened. Maya cooed in response. Malik giggled between hiccups. There was no tension in the air, no dread, only joy. It was fragile, but real. Later that morning, Janelle knocked once before barging in, carrying grocery bags and an eyebrow full of judgment. "You still on that couch?" Wilbert sat up groggily. "Morning to you too." Carissa grinned from the kitchen. "He's earned an upgrade. He can make a bottle in 30 seconds flat now." "Wow. A real prize," Janelle said, unloading baby wipes and oat milk. "You plan to stay here forever, Wilbert, or are you just playing broke so we trust you again?" He smiled. "Neither." Carissa glanced up. Janelle raised a brow. Wilbert set down the bottle and stepped into the kitchen. "I'm here because this is where my family is, and because I never want to be the kind of man who thinks love lives in square footage." Janelle blinked, then grinned. "Okay, well, as long as you're staying humble, you can wash the bottles. I'm not your maid." "Wasn't going to ask," Wilbert said, already moving toward the sink. By week 3, Carissa's heart had shifted. There was no grand moment, no orchestral swell or tearful monologue. It happened when Wilbert changed Malik's diaper in the dark, whispering encouragement through yawns. It happened when he left love notes written in baby food on napkins. It happened when Maya got sick for the first time, and Wilbert held her through the night without complaining. He didn't just want to be there. He belonged there. One night, as rain tapped against the windows and the twins snored in harmony, Carissa leaned on the doorframe of the nursery, watching Wilbert quietly fold tiny onesies. "I'm scared," she whispered. He turned. "Of what?" "Of letting myself want this." He walked to her, took her hand. "I'm not asking for your perfection. I'm asking for your presence, whatever that looks like." She stepped closer. "And if I fall apart again, I'll help you rebuild," he said, "even if it takes years." He smiled. "Then I'll stay for lifetimes." She closed the gap between them and rested her forehead against his chest. Then this time, stay for good. 2 days later, they returned to the penthouse, not because Wilbert asked, but because Carissa chose. She stood at the glass windows and looked out over the city. "It's still cold in here," she said. Wilbert nodded. "Then let's warm it." Over the next month, they transformed it. Gone were the sterile whites and empty echoes. The nursery now spilled with soft blankets, family photos, tiny shoes by the door, and baby bottles in the wine fridge. They moved the couch to face the window, put a playpen where the coffee table used to be. And the fireplace? It finally burned. One crisp morning, Carissa sat on the rooftop terrace wrapped in a robe, a mug of cinnamon tea in her hands. Wilbert walked out holding Maya in one arm, Malik in the other. "Balance," he grunted. "I've mastered it." She laughed. "You look like a tired circus act." He grinned, then paused. "I want to ask you something. Is this about diaper duty again?" "No," he said, setting the babies in the double stroller. "It's about building something permanent." He dropped to one knee. Her heart stuttered. "Wilbert, I know we started with a contract. I know I tried to buy a legacy and almost missed the real one. But I love you. And if you'll have me, officially, completely, I want to marry you." She stared at him, then laughed through her tears. "I thought you'd never ask." He slipped a ring on her finger, one with 3 stones. One for her, one for Maya, one for Malik. A family, sealed not by blood or money, but choice. They married 2 weeks later, not in a ballroom, not on a yacht, but in the backyard of the Queen's apartment, with Janelle officiating, with Stuart holding Maya, with Vance recording every word, wiping away tears he swore were allergies, and with love, loud, earned, and undeniable, filling every corner. As the sun set, Carissa whispered to Wilbert while they danced on the grass barefoot, "I used to pray for escape. Now I pray for more time." He pulled her close. "Then let's make every second holy." And under the light of a life rewritten, they kissed, surrounded by children, community, and a love that had bloomed not in perfection, but in truth. Wilbert stood in the kitchen of Carissa's modest 2-bedroom in Queens, staring at a cracked ceramic mug that read, "Best Mom Ever." The mug was chipped at the handle, stained on the inside. It wasn't expensive, but it was real. Everything in this place felt real. There was a tiny bottle rack for formula, a drying cloth on the counter, 2 tiny pairs of sneakers by the door. Wilbert, who once breathed steel and glass from skyscrapers, was now in a room scented with lavender wipes and cocoa butter. Carissa didn't speak at first. She sat on the couch, Malik on her hip, Maya swaddled beside her. The TV was muted. Closed captions ran beneath a cartoon about singing farm animals. Wilbert cleared his throat. "I didn't know twins could eat so much." Carissa arched a brow. "That's what happens when you feed them the good stuff. You want bland, you got to start buying powdered. I've already started a trust fund for them." She frowned. "That's not what they need." Wilbert nodded. "I know." A long silence passed. Then, "You lied to me," Carissa said. "You promised you wouldn't treat this like a transaction." "I didn't." "You did. You disappeared into your penthouse like it was a vault, sent Vance with gifts and letters, but never came yourself." Wilbert stepped forward, his voice low. "I was afraid." "Of what?" He gestured vaguely at the babies, at the life around him. "Of this, of needing something I can't buy, of loving someone who might walk away." Carissa stood, eyes sharp. "You don't get to say that. I was the one who gave you everything, with no guarantee you'd ever show up. I had every right to disappear." "I know." She didn't expect that answer, that simple acknowledgement. So she sat back down, pulled Maya closer, and whispered, "You don't get forgiveness just because you admit you were wrong." "I don't want forgiveness." She looked up, startled. Wilbert took a slow breath. "I want to earn trust. Different currency, higher price." She stared at him. He meant it. He didn't come with flowers or expensive strollers. He came with calloused hands, with worn shoes, with eyes that had finally seen something worth living for. Wilbert began staying the weekends, not in a guest room, on the couch. He folded his long frame onto the sagging cushions each night, a blanket wrapped around his legs, a twin crying 2 rooms away. The man who once held boardroom PowerPoints now held bottle warmers. He learned how to heat milk without scalding it, learned how to read the difference between Malik's hungry cry and Maya's gassy whimper. He learned lullabies, changed diapers, washed onesies. He also learned Carissa's moods. When she laughed, her nose crinkled. When she was tired, her left eye twitched. When she was overwhelmed, she'd retreat to the fire escape with a book and let the wind cool her down instead of her words. He never intruded. He simply stayed. One day, Carissa asked, "You sleeping okay?" "Honestly, your couch hates me." She laughed. "Good. I hope it bruises your ego." He grinned. That was the first thing cancer did. By month 2, Janelle visited unannounced. She stood in the doorway, sunglasses on, arms folded. So this is the famous Wilbert Royce. Billionaire turned babysitter. Wilbert extended a hand. Janelle looked at it, then shook her head. You don't need to impress me. Impress my niece and nephew. Carissa rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. Janelle walked over to the babies, who were napping in tandem on a shared playmat. I'm watching you, she said to Wilbert without turning. You mess this up again, and I swear, I'll make you wish cancer had finished the job. Wilbert didn't flinch. Fair enough. That night, after everyone slept, Wilbert went to the kitchen and found a small box with 2 pacifiers, labeled extras. Next to it, a single folded photo. It was him, Carissa, Malik, and Maya. All 4 of them under the lemon tree in the tiny backyard. Wilbert stared at the image for a long time. This wasn't legacy. This was family, and he was no longer afraid of it. Weeks became months. His health didn't worsen. In fact, Stuart, who now visited weekly for checkups, was stunned. Your blood work looks stable. Your scans clear. Wilbert blinked. That's not possible. Stuart grinned. Carissa might be magic. Wilbert chuckled. Don't let her hear that, but he did tell her. Later that evening, as they sat watching the twins gum their way through mashed bananas, he whispered, Stuart says I'm getting better. Carissa didn't smile. She looked at him for a long moment, then asked, Are you staying because of that? Because you have time now. Wilbert shook his head. I'm staying because I finally understand what time is for. Her eyes softened, just a little. Then came the night it all broke open. Malik was running a fever. Maya wouldn't sleep. Carissa was exhausted, collapsed on the couch, dark circles under her eyes. Wilbert stayed up. He paced with Malik in his arms, whispering lullabies, pressing cold cloths to his forehead. He mixed tea for Carissa, sat beside her, gently stroked her back. She didn't speak, just leaned into him. For hours, he held the baby and her. At dawn, Malik's fever broke. Maya finally settled. Wilbert tucked them both into the crib, turned around, and saw Carissa watching him from the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Why are you really here? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't dodge it. I'm here, he said, because I was empty. And now, I'm full. She stepped forward. I'm here, he repeated, because I was powerful. And now, I'm useful. Another step. I'm here because I once tried to buy a legacy, but what I found was love. She stared at him for a long time. Then she placed her hands on his chest and kissed him. Not a peck, not passion, but home. It was slow, quiet, deep, like a prayer with no words. When they made love that night, it wasn't fireworks. It wasn't redemption. It was restoration. It was 2 people, broken open, choosing softness again. The next morning, she teased, You sure you're ready for baby spit and no more penthouse? He laughed. I sold the penthouse yesterday. She blinked. What? Vance handled the papers. I'm not going back. Carissa was speechless. You said it once, he added. If I wanted to know them, I had to know us. So this is me. Knowing us, her hand went to her mouth, then to his chest, then to the crib where their children slept. That fall, Wilbert proposed under the lemon tree, the same one from the photo. He didn't bring a diamond. He brought a silver band etched with 4 initials, W.C.M.M. He knelt on one knee and Carissa almost dropped the baby monitor. You can't be serious, she whispered. I've never been more serious, he said. But this isn't about redemption or appearances. This is me asking, can I be yours even with everything I'm not? She cried, then nodded, then said, only if you promise not to snore. Their wedding was in the backyard. Stuart stood as best man. Janelle officiated. She insisted on it, claimed she didn't trust priests. Maya wore a flower crown. Malik walked down the aisle dragging a stuffed turtle. Wilbert wept openly. So did Carissa. So did the neighbors. And when they kissed, the lemon tree shook from the wind. Or maybe joy. At the small reception, Vance handed Wilbert a framed photo. It was the image from the kitchen, the one with all four of them. Below it, etched in soft gold, "You once paid for a legacy. Now you're living one." The morning after the wedding smelled like jasmine tea, honey toast, and baby powder. Wilbert opened his eyes to find Malik's tiny foot planted squarely in his chest. Maya was curled between him and Carissa, her tiny breaths rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. The sun streamed in gently through gauzy curtains, and somewhere beyond the walls, the Bronx was already alive. Trucks, laughter, life. He didn't miss the penthouse. Not one bit. Carissa stirred beside him. Her curls fanned across the pillow like a crown. She opened one eye and whispered, "Your son kicked me in the ribs last night." Wilbert grinned. "Pretty sure he kicked me too. He's democratic like that." She chuckled and nestled closer. "This is real. It's not shiny or quiet or perfect, but it's so real." Wilbert kissed her forehead. "And it's ours." Later that day, Wilbert stood under the lemon tree with Stuart. The nurse sipped from a mug that said "World's Okayest Guy" and watched the twins crawl in mismatched onesies across a playmat laid in the grass. "I didn't think I'd see you standing straight again," Stuart said with a wry smile. "Me neither," Wilbert replied. "But apparently love is better than morphine." Stuart snorted. "Don't tell Big Pharma." Then he sobered. "You know, when I first met you, you were a shell, powerful, brilliant, but hollow. I kept thinking, how does a man have so much and yet so little?" Wilbert nodded slowly. "I ask myself the same thing." Stuart looked over at Carissa, who was trimming the hedges in old jeans and a hoodie that read, "Boss Lady." "And now?" Wilbert smiled. "Now I'm full, with love, with laughter, with life. Cancer still lingers in the shadows, I know. But now, I've got something worth fighting for." That evening, Wilbert called Vance. "I need to amend my will." Vance didn't sound surprised. "You want to leave it all to the kids?" "No," Wilbert said. "I want to leave it to us." There was a pause. "I want Carissa to co-chair the Royce Foundation. She'll turn it into something that actually touches people. Schools, clinics, small businesses. And the twins, let's put some guardrails on their inheritance. Let them earn their place in this world. I had too much, too fast. It almost ruined me." "I'll make it happen," Vance said. "You know, you've changed." Wilbert exhaled softly. "Good. That means I'm growing." By winter, Wilbert was wearing hoodies, not cashmere sweaters, just honest cotton. He took the subway to a local community center where he volunteered twice a week, helping teens with business ideas. Some had sketches. Some had nothing but a spark in their eyes. Wilbert never bragged. He never mentioned his past life unless asked. He was just Mr. Royce, the man who brought snacks and listened better than most adults. One day, a boy named Devon asked, "You used to be a billionaire, right?" Wilbert grinned. "Still am." In hugs. The kids laughed, but Devon didn't. He leaned closer. "But are you happy now?" Wilbert's eyes misted. "Yeah. For the first time in a long time, I am at home." Carissa was watching from the hallway as Wilbert held Maya's hand while she attempted to walk. Malik cheered her on from a pillow fort, waving a sock puppet named Jerry. "You got it, baby girl. You got it." Carissa felt a strange lump in her throat. This man, once so distant, so clinical, was now wiping spit off his neck and high-fiving toddlers like his life depended on it. She snapped a photo without thinking. Later that night, she stared at it, then set it as her phone background. Spring brought a new chapter. Wilbert surprised Carissa with a plot of land. "It's not much," he said, "but it's in Harlem, and I want to build something real on it. A school, maybe, or a child wellness center. Something with our name on it." Carissa blinked. "You mean, like the Royce Monroe Center?" He smiled. "I like that, but why not just write a check to an existing program? Because I don't want to just donate anymore. I want to build, with you, for them. For all the kids who don't get soft starts." Carissa stared at the paper in his hand, the deed signed and notarized. And for the first time since their wedding, she cried in his arms. That summer, Wilbert's diagnosis was officially changed from terminal to indefinite remission. Stuart cried. Vance cried. Even Janelle got misty-eyed but covered it with, "Good. You still owe me for that ridiculous bachelorette night I had to plan." Wilbert took Carissa and the twins on a road trip upstate. Just them, a rented RV, and a playlist full of Motown classics. They hiked. They cooked over fires. They danced barefoot in fields. On one quiet night, under a sky full of stars, Carissa whispered, "I'm not scared anymore." Wilbert kissed her shoulder. "Neither am I." One night back home, Carissa rocked Malik to sleep while Wilbert folded laundry. He looked up. "Do you remember the day I asked you to do this? To carry a child for me?" Carissa didn't answer at first. She hummed a lullaby and then said, "Yeah, I remember the look in your eyes. Like you were trying to buy purpose." "I was." She turned. "And now?" He stepped closer. "Now I've found it." They kissed over Malik's tiny head. Their love didn't grow fast. It grew deep, through late nights, sick days, missed date nights, burnt casseroles, crying twins, surprising laughter, and through it all, Wilbert stayed, not because of a contract, not because of guilt, but because home had finally found him. 2 years later, Carissa stood at a podium, pregnant with their third child, ribbon-cutting a community library named the Lemon Tree House. Wilbert held Maya and Malik's hands beside her. Reporters snapped photos. Children screamed with joy. And on the wall behind them, a mural. Carissa, smiling wide, holding hands with Wilbert. Above them, 2 small children beneath a large lemon tree. The plaque beneath it read, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you build beside." The smell of lemon trees had become part of their lives. It wafted through the air like a quiet symbol of everything they had planted, everything that had bloomed from once barren soil. Carissa stood barefoot in the backyard, her hand resting on the soft curve of her growing belly, while Maya and Malik chased each other in zigzags between flower beds and stepping stones. Wilbert sat on the porch swing with a book in his lap. Not a finance journal, not a tech forecast, but Corduroy, the children's story he now knew by heart. He watched Carissa with quiet awe, her glow, her strength, the way she existed like a warm current that wrapped the whole house in calm. This wasn't the life he had once imagined. It was infinitely better. Later that evening, Wilbert pulled out a box from under the bed. Carissa walked into the bedroom mid-stretch, still wearing yoga pants and a soft cotton tank top that hugged her bump. "What's that?" she asked. Wilbert tapped the top of the box. Memories. Inside were remnants from his old world, company plaques, framed press releases, a metal prototype from his first software suite. At the very bottom, folded neatly, was the contract Carissa had signed 3 years earlier. She looked at it, then looked at him. "You still kept that?" "I did," he said softly. "As a reminder of how wrong I was." He held it up, walked to the fireplace, and tossed it in. They both watched the flames curl and consume the paper until nothing but ash floated upward. "No more contracts," he said. "Just vows." The next morning, Wilbert called Janelle. "I need your help planning a surprise." Janelle gasped dramatically. "If it's another baby shower, count me out. I'm still broke from the last one." "It's not a baby shower," he laughed. "I want to propose to Carissa again. This time, the right way. A vow renewal, but in our way. Not fancy, just real." Janelle paused. "Wait. You're being romantic now. Who are you and what have you done with Wilbert Royce?" Preparations took 2 weeks. Wilbert, with help from Stuart and some neighborhood kids from his volunteer program, transformed their backyard into a soft-lit wonderland. String lights hung from tree to tree. Pillows were arranged in cozy clusters. Lemon tarts baked by Janelle cooled on a tray. Maya and Malik had secretly helped him paint a wooden archway, crooked but colorful. Carissa had no idea. That Saturday evening, as the sun dipped low and fireflies began blinking against the sky, Wilbert called her outside. She stepped into the yard and froze. "What is this?" she whispered. Wilbert, wearing a white button-up and slacks, stood beneath the archway, with Maya holding a small bouquet of wildflowers and Malik holding the rings on a velvet pillow. "It's us," he said. "I never really asked you. You signed papers, carried my children, shared my home. But I never looked you in the eye and asked you to choose me freely." He walked to her slowly, took her hand. "So I'm asking now. Not as the man who wrote contracts, but as the man who burned them. Will you marry me, Carissa?" Again, as us, Carissa's lips trembled. Her eyes glistened. "Of course I will. 1,000 times." They stood beneath the twinkle of string lights. Stuart officiated, wearing a dusty tuxedo jacket and jeans. "I now pronounce you forever teammates," he said with a wink. Maya and Malik squealed and threw petals. Laughter echoed through the yard as neighbors clapped from their porches. It wasn't grand, but it was sacred. Later that night, after the kids were asleep and Janelle had finally left with a box full of lemon bars, Wilbert and Carissa lay on the couch in quiet exhaustion. The fire crackled. Her head rested on his chest. "Do you ever think about how it all began?" she asked. "Every day," he said. "I was dying. I thought buying a child would fix me. I had no idea love would be the cure." Carissa traced a lazy circle on his hand. "We've come so far, and yet," he murmured, "it feels like we're just beginning." In the weeks that followed, life returned to its soft rhythm. Wilbert launched a mentorship incubator out of an old warehouse, offering startup space to low-income entrepreneurs with big dreams. Carissa spearheaded the Lemon Tree Foundation, organizing health clinics, mental wellness workshops, and community parenting classes. Maya started drawing hearts everywhere. Malik learned how to ride a bike and proudly told every stranger, "My daddy taught me." Their world was loud, messy, beautiful. One afternoon, while organizing a clothing drive, Carissa received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside, a photo of Wilbert from 5 years ago, cold-eyed, stiff in a suit, standing beside a now-defunct building, and a note: "Money built your name, but love rebuilt your life." No signature. She showed it to Wilbert that evening. He stared at it for a long time. "I used to think my name mattered more than anything. And now?" she asked. He looked at her, then their kids wrestling on the floor. "Now I just want to be dad, and you're forever." A year passed, then another. Wilbert's cancer never returned. Every checkup ended with Stuart wiping tears from his glasses, whispering, "Miracle, absolute miracle." Maya became a dancer. Malik wanted to build rockets. And Carissa, her smile got deeper, her laughter louder. They were building more than a family. They were building a story. One night, Wilbert took her hand and whispered, "You changed everything." Carissa kissed his knuckles. "No, we changed everything." He held her close. And in the quiet of their home, love, real, raw, earned, wrapped around them like a warm embrace. Not bought, not borrowed, built, together. The scent of jasmine floated in the air, mixing with citrus from the backyard lemon tree. Fairy lights blinked softly across the wooden fence. A gentle summer breeze rustled through freshly trimmed grass as Maya and Malik tiptoed barefoot between garden lanterns, giggling over a secret mission that Carissa hadn't yet discovered. Inside, Wilbert adjusted his collar in the mirror for the 3rd time. "Do I look nervous?" he asked Stuart, who stood at the doorway, arms folded. "You look like a man about to propose," Stuart said, grinning. Again, Wilbert exhaled. "It still feels like the first time." Stuart walked over, handed him a small velvet ring box. "Then good, that means it's still real." Backyard fairy lights came alive as dusk settled. Carissa had just finished folding baby clothes for their newest child, Jamari, barely 6 months old, when Janelle texted, "Come outside." "Now." "Don't ask." She raised an eyebrow but obeyed. What she stepped into made her breath catch. The yard was transformed. Twinkling lights arched from the fence posts to the lemon tree. A picnic table draped in white linen sat under a pergola wrapped in flowers. Lemonade, Tarts, fresh fruit, and her favorite candle, vanilla with a touch of sandalwood, sat arranged with care. And in the middle of it all stood Wilbert. Maya and Malik popped out from behind a bush with paper crowns and homemade wands. "Mommy," Malik shouted, "this is your magic night." Carissa laughed, her eyes immediately welling up. "What is this?" she whispered as she walked to Wilbert. He took her hand. "It's us." She looked around. Janelle recording discreetly from the corner, Stuart sipping lemonade with a proud smirk. "I wanted to give you something," Wilbert continued. "Something that matches the life we've built." He turned to the twins. "May I have the rings?" Malik held out the velvet box with the seriousness of a knight. Maya nodded encouragingly, like she knew every word Wilbert was about to say. He opened the box and revealed a sapphire stone surrounded by 2 small diamonds. "Sapphire for you, my peace, my strength," he said, voice trembling. "Diamonds for Malik and Maya, our light and our laughter." Carissa gasped softly. Wilbert took a deep breath. "You once agreed to carry my child, not for money, but for meaning. You moved into a house where love had never lived, and filled it with warmth I never knew I needed." He dropped to one knee. "I don't want this ring to represent wealth. I want it to represent everything we fought through, every scar, every joy. Will you marry me again, Carissa? Not for the papers, not for the kids, but because I can't breathe in a world where your name isn't beside mine." Silence. Then Carissa crouched to her knees too, cupping his face. "I've been yours," she whispered, "since the peanut butter toast." They laughed, and the kids clapped furiously. Janelle wiped her cheeks behind the phone camera. Wilbert slid the ring onto her finger, and Carissa kissed his hand. Then his mouth. Then his soul. The night was a blur of laughter and light. They danced barefoot in the grass to an old jazz record. Stuart and Janelle shared stories of their first impressions, Stuart admitting he thought Carissa was too sunshiny for Wilbert, and Janelle recalling how she almost set him up on a blind date to speed up her sister's decision-making. Afterward, Carissa leaned into Wilbert's shoulder, watching Maya and Malik chase fireflies. "You know," she said softly, "I never expected all of this." He kissed her temple. "Neither did I. I thought I was paying for an heir. I didn't know I was planting a family." She turned toward him. "You didn't just plant it, Will. You watered it. You stayed. That's the miracle." Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Carissa stepped into their room and found Wilbert on the bed with Jamari asleep on his chest. She stared for a moment. This man, once untouchable, once so deeply disconnected from the world, was now humming lullabies off-key and changing diapers without flinching. She lay beside him, resting her head on his shoulder, careful not to wake the baby. "You're different," she whispered. "I hope so." She smiled. "You still snore." "I do not." "You do. Like a freight train through cotton candy." He chuckled quietly. "And you still hog the covers." She pulled them tighter around herself defiantly. "Because I was cold. For years." He wrapped his arm around her waist. "Then you'll never be cold again." A few weeks later, Stuart announced his retirement. "I've served the Royce family for 2 decades, he said, raising a glass during a small dinner Wilbert arranged. "But this is the first time I've ever seen a Royce man truly live." He turned to Carissa. "Thank you for giving him breath again." Then to Wilbert, who stood, eyes glistening. "No," Wilbert said, lifting his glass in turn. "Thank you for keeping me alive long enough to meet her." They toasted, and for once, no one said anything after. They didn't need to. As Jamari grew and the house filled with louder mornings and longer bedtime stories, Wilbert and Carissa made a choice. They bought a second home, not a mansion but a farmhouse 2 hours outside the city. Wilbert started painting again. Carissa taught local moms how to manage finances, and every Friday night, like ritual, they made lemonade from their backyard tree, sat on the porch with the kids, and talked about everything from constellations to cartoons. One evening, Malik looked up and said, "Daddy?" "Yeah, buddy?" "Did Mommy make you better?" Wilbert looked at Carissa. She smiled gently. He answered, "No, she didn't make me better. She made me real." And maybe that was it. Maybe love wasn't thunder or lightning. Maybe it was peanut butter jars, soft jazz, warm bottles, tiny hands wrapped around your thumb, the way someone's laughter could melt the sharpest grief, the way a maid became a wife, and a dying billionaire became a father who lived, all because of a contract that turned into a covenant, and a womb that grew not just children, but legacy. The morning sun slipped through cotton curtains in a modest two-story home on the edge of Queens. The air smelled of maple syrup and baby lotion. In the kitchen, Carissa balanced a baby bottle in one hand and a spatula in the other, humming as she flipped pancakes while Malik scribbled dinosaurs on a coloring book and Maya babbled from her high chair, delighted with her mashed bananas. Wilbert stepped into the doorway in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking like any suburban dad who'd finally found peace after a lifetime of storm. No more silks, no designer robes, no marble floors beneath his feet, just worn hardwood, a dish towel draped over his shoulder, and two children who called him Daddy with pure innocence. He watched the scene, heart full. "You do realize," he said with a smirk, "these pancakes have spoiled me. I'll never eat at a five-star brunch again." Carissa glanced over her shoulder, amused. "You better not. Those tiny hands slap better than Yelp reviews." Malik perked up. "What's Yelp?" Wilbert laughed, lifting him into a spin that made the boy squeal. "It's a place where people go to complain." "Oh," Malik nodded seriously. "Like Auntie Janelle?" Carissa burst into laughter so loud Maya clapped her hands in delight. Janelle herself arrived a few minutes later, holding a bag of groceries and her usual sass. "Speak of the Queen," she said, catching the tail end of the conversation. "I heard someone say my name and felt my spirit get lighter." Wilbert smiled. That was probably the pancakes. She eyed him with mock suspicion. No more billionaire brooding vibes. "You look human, that's the goal," he replied softly. "To live human. To love human." He wasn't just saying it. Over the past year, Wilbert had shed the trappings of the empire he built. The penthouse was sold. The boardroom was now a once-a-month visit. Vance, his loyal attorney, had helped transfer control of the company to a trusted managing partner. The money still existed, so did the legacy, but for Wilbert, legacy had found a different meaning. It wasn't about controlling headlines anymore. It was about Maya's first words, Malik's bedtime stories, Carissa's smile when she leaned against him on the porch, tea in her hand, dusk curling around their shoulders. One afternoon, while folding laundry with Stuart on the couch, Wilbert asked, "Did you ever think we'd end up like this?" Stuart chuckled. "You mean alive?" "I mean, complete." The nurse-turned-friend nodded, then looked away. "You know, I used to think your cancer was the storm, but maybe it was the mirror." Wilbert considered that for a long moment. "And Carissa?" "She was the answer," Stuart said, with no hesitation. That evening, Wilbert sat outside on a weathered swing while Malik crawled onto his lap, pointing at a paper airplane stuck in the gutter. Maya toddled across the yard chasing fireflies, giggling every time one escaped her grasp. Carissa emerged with a light blanket and wrapped it around them all. "You remember," she said softly, "when we first met, you looked at me like I didn't belong in your world." Wilbert looked up at her with nothing but tenderness. "Now I know I never belonged in mine." She sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "It wasn't the money, Wilbert. It was you. I needed to see if you were more than a man in a suit." "I'm still learning to be," he said. "But I had a good teacher." She chuckled. "You were a terrible student." "And yet," he said, kissing her forehead, "here I am, graduated with twins and a woman who still keeps me humble." Their wedding had been small, held beneath a lemon tree in the backyard that Carissa had planted on a whim. No chandeliers, no tuxedos, just a rented white tent, homemade lemonade, and vows that meant something because they were earned. Vance gave a toast that night, holding up a photo of the original contract Wilbert had given Carissa. Once, the lawyer said, this was how Wilbert thought life should be negotiated. But now he understands. Some of the best deals in life come without clauses. Janelle teared up. Stuart danced with Maya. Malik stole frosting from the wedding cake. And Carissa wore white, not because she had to, but because it symbolized the fresh start they both chose together. Years passed. Quietly, beautifully. Wilbert's health, against every medical prediction, stabilized. The tumors shrank. Stuart retired, but stayed close, becoming Uncle Stu to the twins. Wilbert said the only miracle drug he ever needed was breakfast laughter and someone who loved him at his weakest. Carissa opened a small daycare down the block called Tiny Seeds. Her mission wasn't just childcare, it was soul care. She took in kids from all walks of life, telling each parent, every child deserves to be seen. One rainy afternoon, Wilbert picked Malik and Maya up early. He stood at the doorway watching Carissa sit cross-legged with a circle of toddlers, telling a story with voices and faces that made them squeal and giggle and gasp. She looked up and smiled at him, and in that split second, Wilbert knew this was it. This was the legacy. Not stocks, not shares, not structures or prestige, but a woman who had every right to walk away and instead built a life with him. 2 children who giggled without fear, a house that smelled like cinnamon and hugs. Later that evening, he sat beside her in the living room, both kids asleep. He pulled out a tiny velvet box, not with diamonds, but with 2 hand-carved rings etched with the twins' initials. "For all the days we didn't know how to say it," he murmured. She slipped her ring on. And all the days still ahead, they kissed, not out of passion, but out of partnership, of peace, of 2 broken souls who became whole together. The doorbell rang. It was a young woman, no older than 20, holding a baby on her hip. She looked exhausted, wet from the rain, and unsure if she should even be there. I saw the sign out front," she said. "The daycare. I'm staying down the street. My daughter's sick, and I don't have anyone else." Carissa smiled, stepping forward. "Come in," she said. "You're not alone anymore." Wilbert stood behind her and whispered in her ear, "You gave me everything when I had nothing left. Now let's spend the rest of our lives giving it back." And just like that, the house grew warmer. The legacy continued, not in wealth, but in love multiplied. Sometimes, the richest people aren't the ones with the biggest homes or bank accounts, but those who choose love after loss, healing after hurt, and purpose over pride. Wilbert thought legacy came from empires, but in the end, it came in the form of pancakes, peanut butter, and bedtime kisses. Carissa didn't need to be rescued. She became the rescue. So, now, let me ask you, have you ever seen love bloom in the most unexpected way? Has someone ever changed your life? Just by showing up and staying? Drop your story in the comments below. Your words might be the hope someone else needs tonight. Don't forget to like this story if it touched your heart. Share it with someone who still believes in second chances. And most importantly, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more tales that don't just entertain, but heal. Until next time, stay kind, stay brave, and remember, some hearts are worth waiting for.